Always disappointing ended to see cutbacks on services, though I suppose for the winter season that's inevitable. However, the one that people took some encouragement out of was the probability that you're now going to look again at keeping the Shannon-New York service in place this coming winter. Is that a done deal at this stage?
Well, no, I mean, we certainly welcomed the decision by Delta to terminate their services. It's interesting, today we've learned they've also terminated services from Edinburgh to the US, which just shows how difficult things are for the US carriers. We're going to have a look at it. I can't give any guarantees as to whether it'll mean that the route will be kept. We've been suffering significant losses on that route for the last 10 years, and that was part of our decision on Friday to make those announcements of route closures, because certainly profitability in the winter is a real problem for us.
Sure. And I suppose the real concern that a lot of people, not just in Shannon but in the whole west of Ireland, would have is about these routes returning next spring. Are you confident that the routes that you have suspended for the winter, that they all will return next summer?
Again, I can't give guarantees as to whether they'll all return, but certainly demand is very different in the summer than in the winter. There are routes that are profitable in the summer but not in the winter, so certainly we'd hope that the majority of them would come back. But in certain cases, such as Washington, the demand doesn't appear to be there either in the summer or the winter, so that's one we're going to have to keep an eye on.
Yeah. California, people talk about it as being the 5th largest economy in the world if it were a country by itself, and a huge source market for European tourists. So for years we were looking for direct service to Ireland, and that came of course from Los Angeles by yourselves, and then subsequently from San Francisco. And Los Angeles went last year, the end of last year, which is disappointing, and certainly worrying that San Francisco is gone for the winter. But are you reasonably confident that it will return to Dublin for next year?
Well, the west coast of the US has two big issues for going against it. One is the relative cost of operation. Fuel hits the west coast disproportionately, and in terms of the crew costs are very expensive. On the other hand, the fares that customers are prepared to pay, both from the US into Ireland and from Ireland to the US, are relatively low. So it makes those routes very marginal in terms of profitability. Certainly in the winter there was a clear case not to operate into San Francisco, and we took that decision. It's a different story in the summer, but we'll have to keep an eye on the fuel price. Once fuel goes above $80 a barrel, it really makes routes such as the west coast very, very dicey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting though that some people might say that at a time when the US economy is showing some signs of recovery, that you would be cutting back, and disappointing maybe that you didn't hang in there, or is that a fair, valid point?
No, I think we have to make commercial decisions. We have to generate returns on our assets, being our aircraft. We have to deploy them in the most profitable way. I think there's a different scenario in the summer than in the winter, but I think the macroeconomic environment is still very poor. Demand is very weak out of Ireland, very weak in the US. I think the relative weakness of the dollar to the euro is also an issue. In our own business, we don't see any real return to sort of normality, if you like, certainly until the end of next year at the earliest, and that really won't play into our business model until the following year. So I think the decisions we've taken make sense for the short term, and of course we'll review things in the medium term. A good example of that is the increasing frequency into Shannon, into Heathrow, to 3. There was a decision that was taken at one point because of profitability and cost issues. The cost issues were addressed, and we're now going to base an A320 in Shannon, increasing the frequency to three a day. So, decisions are made with the right information at the right time, and I think we'll make the same decisions on the transatlantic.
Sure, and of course that's very good news to see the increased connectivity over London, because it was a matter of deep concern for many in the tourist industry on the west coast. But finally, your chairman, Colin Barrington, talked about rolling out a broader cost reduction plan shortly, which will bring your cost base into line with that of your closest competitors. Is that likely to contain more job losses, or will you seek those cost reductions elsewhere?
No, I think what we're looking at is a fundamental reshaping of the business. This is a business that's predicted by analysts this year to lose €100 million. We lost 17.6 million in an operating loss last year. This can't go on. We're competing in a very difficult environment with a competitor whose costs are significantly lower than ours, but a revenue environment where customers are only prepared to buy flights if they're significantly cheaper than they were last year. So this review that we're carrying out is not something that will be tinkering around the edges. It'll be looking at the future size and shape of Aer Lingus going into the next 5 to 10 years, the number of aircraft we operate, long haul, short haul, the type of product, how it's served, who serves it, the price it'll be charged for, and the type of support that the organisation will need to support the product. So a very fundamental change that's being worked through at the moment, and we'll be rolling it out as soon as it's ready, and it'll be ready hopefully in the next coming weeks.
Sure. Enda, thank you for that. The tourism industry wishes you well in successfully managing your way through these extremely difficult times. An early return to prosperity and growth in the tourism industry is to a substantial degree contingent upon an early return to prosperity and growth in Aer Lingus, who play such an important role in driving the tourism business in Ireland. So the best of luck for the future.
Thanks very much, Eamon.